Good evening, Houdat Nation, and happy Wednesday, Bayou Blitz family. I hope everybody is doing well out there, having a great week, enjoying the summer weather, staying safe, staying happy. On that note, and hopefully this doesn't bring down your happiness, but I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast. Joining me as always and bringing up the happy quotient is my partner and my friend, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, happy 1 year anniversary.
Yeah, you too. I'll take the time in the show now to get the sappiness out. We can move on to the more important things when it comes to the Saints world, because we actually have some decent news, which we've kind of been waiting on for a little bit. So the sappy part of it is, yeah, happy 1 year together. It's kind of crazy to think that, this time last year, we finally decided to kind of move forward in this idea. We had been brainstorming over the years because of the kind of on-air chemistry we had during the draft shows. Well, we should do something. And the opportunity kind of opened up. We ran with it, and I'm just grateful that throughout this process and some moving parts, certainly me moving into a full-time position, and obviously you're aware as the viewers are of the Brendan Boylan world tour. So I thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of the Bayou Blitz family, be a part of the journey, and continue to grow, because it's been a blast through 1 year, and 52 episodes in is pretty wild.
Yeah, it sure is. And I'll tell you, it's my pleasure to be working with you. Like you said, we've known each other for several years. Having started, together way back when, when Kyle Mosley, the current editor-in-chief of the Saints News Network, and kind of very much a mentor to us both, brought us together and introduced us on his old show, The Crescent City Connection. Kyle, as he's apt to do, just kind of passed over the baton to us. Let us roll with this. Let us develop our own show. Let us develop our own product. But it's you guys too. It's you guys, the viewer, you guys, the listener. We always tell you that this is your Bayou Blitz. This is your show. We are your hosts. And you guys have taken that and run with it. You've made us grow exponentially in the last year. We are on, the maybe not the big national radar yet, but we are on the radar of pretty much every Saints fan out there. Certainly the ones that have any social media accounts whatsoever, and that's because of you. We get guests on so easily. Brendan and I have worked up legitimate friendships with these former players and some current. But that doesn't necessarily mean the player, just because you're friends with a player doesn't mean they're going to be really willing to come onto your show. It's the kind of viewership and the kind of response that you guys give them when they're on with us. Word has gotten out to other former players, that at times have even reached out to Brendan and I to tell us, hey, you guys ever want me to come on? You just you shoot me a message. That's because of you guys. So I hope you're able to. Don't do it if you're driving, but give yourself a pat on the back, because it's you guys that have made this product grow. And really, honestly, it's you guys that have made this such a pleasure to do week in and week out.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have to say anything, Bob. You said everything so perfect. If I said anything else, I'd just mess it up. So thank you guys for hanging out with us for an entire year with the Bayou Blitz. With that, we wanted to do something a little special. So we're going to be doing a giveaway, but it's going to be on social media only. So sorry to your YouTubers who don't have social media. Maybe you just make a dummy page just to follow the Bayou Blitz, Bob and I, and get in on this giveaway. But we have a giveaway coming up, so just check out the Twitter page at Bayou Blitz Pod, and follow the instructions and make sure that you are entered. So let's move on to the big news of the week, something that we didn't really know if we were going to have any clarity on anytime soon. I mean, there were even speculations from you and I in the recent past that this might be something that kind of drags out through training camp and drags out through the preseason, and potentially don't get an NFL discipline until the regular season or somewhat into the regular season. So, Alvin Kamara, please, no contests to a lesser charge, a misdemeanor charge, and you can correct me if I have some of this legal, jumbo words that I don't understand, confused. But he's pleading no contest to a lesser charge in the case out in Las Vegas at the Pro Bowl a few years ago. So Kamara will not be facing any jail time, but is going to have to do some community service, is going to be paying a little over $100,000 worth of medical expenses. And now the Saints just sit and wait on what the NFL's discipline is going to be towards Alvin Kamara. Bob, I'll start here. Are you surprised how quickly this kind of got wrapped up after the news that, oh, hey, the court date is coming up? And then second, what are your expectations for the NFL's discipline that will eventually be handed down to Alvin Kamara?
Brendan, I was surprised. And the reason that I was surprised was that because all along we have heard from Alvin Kamara and his legal team that they were pleading not guilty and that they were going to fight this right into a courtroom. They were claiming that they had evidence to at least dispute, if not completely refute, the prosecution's claim and charges of felony assault. We have seen at least 3 continuances, delays, in the court hearing, if not 4. So the fact that he decided now to plead no contest, and basically accept a lesser charge, throwing the felony assault out the window, it's good news. Don't get me wrong, because anytime you go to court, it's an awful big risk, regardless of the evidence on either side. You take a roll of the dice. And in Kamara's case, he's rolling the dice on his professional career. It could have perhaps been that serious. Personally, I never thought he would see the inside of a jail cell at all. But again, you never know what could happen when you get inside that courtroom. So it's good news for Alvin Kamara and the New Orleans Saints on the football field. Now, like you said, we wait for the NFL official punishment. The league sent out a statement yesterday after the news. I believe it was yesterday. After the news of Kamara's no contest plea, and all they said was, "We are monitoring the situation." Well, guys, the league has had 17 months to monitor this situation. Therefore, there is no reason, and I mean 0 reason, for the league not to step in very quickly and hand down their form of discipline. As you and I have said many times on our show, the NFL didn't have to wait to see how the legal proceedings played out. But in recent years, basically since the Ray Rice incident of about a decade or so ago, they have chosen, wisely so, to wait till legal proceedings play out before the league hands down their punishment. Now, the punishment. Kamara is in violation of the NFL's personal conduct policy, which is a contractual behavioral agreement between the league and the NFL Players Association. So this is agreed on legally by all parties. And the baseline punishment for such an infraction like this to the personal conduct policy is a suspension anywhere from 4 to 6 games. Now, the caveat to remember about this is the commissioner's office, and I'll try not to smirk when I say this, the commissioner's office reserves the right to lengthen or reduce said suspension. Now, of course, on the other hand, Kamara has the right to appeal whatever punishment is handed down. So what should happen is that the NFL steps in within the next week or so, to hand down their suspension, because Kamara is going to be suspended, to hand down their suspension of Kamara. My hunch is that it will follow the baseline, 4 to 6 games. I feel it'll probably be 6 because, after all, we are talking about Roger Goodell and the New Orleans Saints. Kamara will undoubtedly appeal said suspension. If the appeal isn't heard until the start of the regular season, let's say I'm right, and let's say the league does hand down a 6-game suspension in the next week or so. Obviously, those 6 games won't start until week 1 of the regular season. If Kamara appeals, then depending on how quickly his appeal is heard, if his appeal isn't heard until the start of the regular season, then he will be allowed to play until the appeal is heard.
And I think that's where it could get a little tricky, right? Because the last thing you want to do is have this, and we just talked about that, finally some answers. It's not going to linger on. Well, what if it does? What if it does linger into the regular season? What if the appeal is not heard until week 4, 5, 6, whatever week it is? And then the last thing you want, if you're the New Orleans Saints in a situation like this, is to have Kamara suspended during some of those key weeks in the season where the chemistry starts clicking and you start getting rolling, and you're getting extremely competitive when it comes to a playoff position. That's the last thing you want to happen. Now, I too am surprised how this process played out and how quickly it seemed to play out. However, to your point, Bob, on the fact that the NFL has had a long time to monitor or be aware of the situation, I'll use a comparison of another sport in a similar case just last year, and that was in the NBA. Had Miles Bridges, who was arrested for felony domestic violence charges, had the case and the hearings continued to be pushed back and delayed and delayed and delayed. And then finally the parties found some sort of plea agreement like Alvin Kamara's, where he pled no contest to felony domestic violence, and got a couple lesser charges, is on probation for a certain amount of time. But the league waited until after the courts did its thing to come out with any punishment. And then the league stepped back, and in this situation, a little different than Kamara, said, we're not going to hand you a punishment until you sign with a team because you're a free agent. And that lingered through the season until this offseason, where he signed a qualifying offer and, ultimately got his suspension. But that's the last thing that Bridges and his camp wanted during last season, because he's sitting at home going, I could sign with a team right now that's going to contend for the playoffs, and I can't because I'm not suspended yet. And as soon as I put pen to paper, I'm going to be suspended. Now, like I said, different situation, but the same in the sense of you have a situation where the league allowed the court to do their thing. They have had plenty of time, plenty of months to determine, what do we want to do about this situation? The NBA decided, we're going to continue to monitor the situation until we don't have to anymore. The NFL in a little bit of a different boat, but even though they've had all those months, Bob, I guess what I'm trying to get across is they could still very well take their time in this process. They're in no rush. They're in no hurry. While Kamara, his camp, and the Saints may be in a little bit of a hurry to know, hey, what's going on? I would not be surprised to see the NFL drag their feet on an official suspension. I could definitely see it coming sometime later in training camp. Because in all honesty, you just never know with this league. you go all the way back to the Ray Rice situation that you talked about. And the one thing that sticks out about that whole situation was the Roger Goodell soundbite of, "We've got to get it right." And though this is not the same as that horrendous video that came out of Ray Rice all those years ago, it is similar in the fact that we still do not have structure in the NFL on how things and situations in potential criminal cases are handled after the court has its findings. And because of that, you, me, national writers, local writers, reporters, what have you, really have no idea how to interpret what the NFL put out yesterday and saying, we're aware of it and we're going to monitor it and we're going to figure it out when we figure it out. To where it would be extremely nice, I think, for the Players Association, the fans, the media, to have a blueprint of, okay, after the court has its official findings, the NFL has X amount of time to hand out its discipline. And if that discipline is not handed out in X amount of time, there is none. That would be the nice thing. Maybe they can negotiate that in the next collective bargaining agreement, if that's possible. But that's kind of where we all stand, is we really have no idea. If I had to guess, you said 4 to 6 for Kamara. I'm going to go on the higher side because it's the NFL. And I'm going to say it's going to be 6 to 8, but I'm leaning towards 6. I have very little faith that it would be anything less than 6.
And I've been telling, I keep saying 4 to 6 because that's the baseline, for this kind of offense. But my hunch is my hunch is the initial ruling is going to be a 6-game suspension, which Kamara will plead down to likely 4, hopefully as few as 3. One thing that works in Alvin's favor, is that he has never been in any trouble on or off the field before or since that incident. He has never been the source of any public controversy, no private controversy, not even rumors of such, as far as we know. So that you would think that works in his favor. Now, obviously, the thing against him is the video evidence. That's harsh. It's hard to refute what your eyes see. I've had people tell me that they believe that Kamara is going to be suspended for 10 or 12 games. Look at the Deshaun Watson situation. That situation was far more despicable. Multiple cases in that situation. Now, obviously, the Deshaun Watson also never saw the inside of a criminal courtroom. But again, that's because these things were settled. But again, I go back to these were multiple incidents. Deshaun received, I believe it was an 11-game suspension, if I'm not mistaken. So I would find it absolutely appalling if Kamara received anywhere close to that, given Alvin's personal conduct before and since that incident. So I believe, again, 6 games will be on the harsher side. And I see him appealing it down to probably 4 games. But let me ask you, Brendan, because you've said a couple of times now that you're afraid that this will still drag out from the league's perspective. Would you be surprised if Kamara, or do you expect Kamara to still be suspended to start the 2023 regular season?
I mean, I would hope so. Yes, I have concerns about the league dragging its feet, and the Saints not having a true idea until maybe even week 1 of the preseason how long Kamara is going to be suspended. But I still think that's dragging its feet, even if I'm right in that assumption, is going into preseason week 1 and not being able to sit there and go, okay, well, we're not going to have Kamara, so let's see who we have here, here, and here, especially with just one round of cuts this for the first time. I think that makes things a little bit more difficult for the Saints. Not extremely over the top. I mean, they're one of the deepest teams in the league when it comes to running back depth, especially experience at the running back position. But, and, you know, I don't see this being something where, oh, we're in week 4 or week 3 before suspension's handed out. Like, I think we will know, fans will know, the team will know, Kamara will know by week 1 what the deal is. But again, you know, if you're the NFL and you're gonna put a statement out yesterday in regards to what's going on, and you're aware of the situation, then it shouldn't take that long to sit there and decide, well, how long are we going to suspend this guy for?
No.
And
no, absolutely not. Kamara should be better be contacted by the end of this week or at the latest Monday morning. Alvin, the big guys in the league office want to see you on such and such a date. That's how quickly this next step should happen.
Absolutely, because right now there's not a whole lot going on, right? Mm-hmm. Training camp hasn't started. You know, you're done with the draft, like the waves of free agency. Like, there's not a whole lot going on in these league offices at this particular time. Make it quick, make it easy. You made up some great points in comparing it to other suspensions, and I'm sure the league will do that and look at the CBA and go, okay, well, this is where he broke this code of conduct, so it should fall between this time, like these games, and looking at other but that doesn't take long. If you and I can speculate on a Wednesday night in the middle of July and say, well, based off of other suspensions and what we understand of the NFL's code of conduct, like, this is the time frame in which Kamara should be suspended for. And you and I, who are not, you know, paid boatloads of money to understand legal contracts between leagues and players associations, if we can sit here and you and I both said somewhere around 6 games sounds about right, then it should take people who make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to come together. It should take them no time at all to be like, okay, well, here are examples. These are what we think. Commissioner Goodell, we're going to leave this on your desk. You can do what you want with it. And then Goodell goes, okay, well, we got to get it right, and this looks right. And, you know, do whatever he has to do from there. But it doesn't take long. And that's what's going to be frustrating. And that's what's going to frustrate me.
Yep.
As someone who has spent his life as a fan, his life as someone who's covered this game for a long time, to know that despite all of the things that have happened over the last decade, we still don't have a formula or a system for how any of this works. And I know every case is different, but like I said earlier, is it not easy enough to say, whenever the court concludes we are giving ourselves this amount of time? Like, to me, that's so simple. Because we did the same thing with, you brought up Deshaun Watson. How long did that go on? You know, and given there was more and more cases added, more and more people came forward, and that was a different headache in itself. So if anything, I can give them some leeway with that. But it still took way too long for them to be like, well, how long are we going to suspend Deshaun for?
You can't convince me otherwise, in my belief that the league was waiting to see what team Deshaun Watson would go to before they decided how long. You can't convince me otherwise. Welcome to the dictatorship of the National Football League.
Well, it's what's best for, well, you know, without getting into
say it.
Without too many conspiracies, they were not going to suspend Deshaun for what we said. He got 11 games, right? Because he was active week 13, so 11 games plus bye week.
Coincidentally, against his former team,
right? It's all for ratings. I mean, if Deshaun were to have gone to a big market team right? And I know it really wasn't down to big market teams when it came to the end of it, right? Because it was Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, Cleveland. Like, as much as I enjoy covering this football team, New Orleans has never been a big market team, right? It's not America's team. It's not in LA. It's not, right? But if for whatever reason Deshaun went and signed with the Cowboys, right? You think Deshaun would have been suspended 11 games? No. He would have been suspended like 6 games.
If that.
Like 6, appeal down to 4. Like something like that. At the end of the day, that's what this is. Now, that's terrible to say because at the end of the day, and I do want to address this because we've talked about Ray Rice, we've talked about Deshaun Watson, I talked about Miles Bridges in the NBA. Like, it's disgusting to say because a lot of those women that were affected by the actions of these people will never feel as if they got the proper justice for such a terrible crime against them. And what kind of slap in the face is it after the fact for us to be discussing this, which means they have to have open knowledge about this as well.
Yeah.
That the NFL, the NBA, whatever, really just sits and goes, what's going to be better for our ratings? If Deshaun plays against this team on this many primetime games, or if Ray Rice comes back in the league and does this and that, or if Miles Bridges signs here and does this, like that whole thing is sickening because what it reminds me, and man, this show's getting really deep tonight, but it reminds me that at the end of the day, for the leagues, for these multi-billion-dollar corporations, it's not about people, it's not about justice, it's not about getting things right. It's about making more money.
Always.
So I'll step down from my little soapbox on that, but it's gross and it's terrible. But you're absolutely right. And again, the Kamara situation is not the same because he's not a free agent and doing this and doing that. But if Kamara were to be grossly over-suspended, you also have to think about this. The league can't sit there, and to Bob's point earlier, if Kamara were to get anything close to Deshaun Watson, the NFL is going to be under such scrutiny because it's like, okay, well then how did Deshaun only get this? Right? And that goes all the way back to the Ray Rice thing when he was initially suspended for what was it, 4 games initially?
I think it was 2.
It might have, yeah, whatever it was, and then it ended up getting extended after the fact. But the NFL's got to be really careful for their own image and their own sense of getting more money that they don't make it too questionable, right? Again, Bob and I are kind of on the same page. Somewhere around 6 games. Kamara will appeal. He'll get a game or 2 removed. That'll be that. But at the end of the day, I am still so frustrated that there's still not a strict policy for how all of this works. And I know a lot of them over the last decade has been domestic violence, sexual assault, something along those lines. And this isn't quite that for Alvin Kamara. But again, there has to be structure in situations like this because when you don't have structure, you're not doing a couple things. You're not being transparent with your fans. You're not being transparent with the owners, which is part of the reason and how you make money as a league. But then third, you're not doing anybody any justice by allowing these things to kind of just be like, let's grab some spaghetti and see if it sticks. Because sometimes that's what it feels like is this situation, let's count how many seconds it sticks to the wall before it falls, and that's how many games they're going to be suspended. Like, that's what it comes across as, and it's disappointing. Because, again, over the last decade, they've had a decade to get this stuff right, and they haven't. Whether it be, criminal felony assault in Kamara's case that he's now, pled no contest to, and that charge has gone away. all the way to the most serious and heinous of crimes against women, and we still can't get anything right.
Mm.
That's where I stand on pretty much all of that.
And I agree with you. Hey, listen, let's take it back to the football field, though. We've always known that Alvin Kamara is going to miss a chunk of games.
Yeah.
The New Orleans Saints prepared for this offseason very well, in my opinion. And also bolstered the backfield depth when there was none the last 2 years in bringing in Jamal Williams, 1,000-yard rusher, led the league in rushing touchdowns last year. Kendre Miller, a dynamic back, from TCU. And an experienced veteran, an experienced young veteran when they brought Benjamin in last year. I wrote an article about this for the Saints News Network, and I published it this morning. If Kamara is only facing, say, ultimately a 4-game or so suspension, I believe that the Saints will probably believe that they have enough backfield talent to keep the ship righted until Kamara gets back. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on A, if you agree with that, but also B, if Kamara is suspended a lengthier sentence, amount of games, 6 games or more. I listed 7 names, 7 free agent backs still available. They are Dalvin Cook, who the Saints aren't going to sign. Dalvin's going to get starters money somewhere. But Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, Kenyon Drake, J.D. McKissick, Marlon Mack, and Benny Snell were the names I specified. If Kamara gets a lengthy suspension, do you see the Saints maybe reaching out to one of those guys, or do you still think that, assuming Williams and Miller, knock on wood, stay healthy, do you think that they'll feel that they still have enough talent to keep the ship on course until Alvin gets back?
I think regardless of what the suspension is, I think the Saints have enough talent to do what they need to do, right? And that's because, knock on wood, they stay healthy. They're going to have enough players that bring you enough versatility to where you don't have to find one guy to replace Alvin Kamara, but you're going to have like 3 guys that replace the production, right? Because Jamal Williams is going to be your workhorse running back. He's going to be between your tackles. He's going to sniff out those hard yards. He's going to be the Mark Ingram type of running back that the Saints have had over the years. And congrats to Mark on getting his broadcasting gig with Fox. Very excited. I think he's going to do really well breaking down college football. He just seems like a personality, and obviously his podcast with Cameron Jordan, he just comes across as a guy who's going to be very successful in that aspect of his career. But that's what Jamal is going to do for New Orleans. And then you have a guy like Miller who didn't get a lot of opportunities at TCU to show that he could catch the ball to the backfield, but very capable, very dynamic runner. So you have that guy in the equation. You have Taysom Hill in the equation. Do a little bit of everything. And again, should everybody stay healthy, look at how the Saints used Rashid Shaheed at points last season. I think a mix of those 3 guys could certainly help the production, depending on how much time Kamara misses. Now, if you guys have been hanging out with us over the last 52 episodes, you guys know Eno Benjamin is one of my guys. Now, he might not make the team. He might be a guy in 15, 20 years that when Bob's in a nursing home, did I say that out loud? That we talk about and go,
Thanks for giving me 15 or 20 years. I appreciate that.
I could see it now. Lawrence just like, I'm done. He's going in the home.
Yeah, that could happen next week.
Exactly. So we might sit in 15, 20 years talk about, remember that Eno Benjamin guy? Like, I really wish we would have kept him around. He was really good. But I still think that, the experience that he brings, and he certainly showed during his time in Arizona last year, he can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So I think the Saints have enough there that they could not just steer the ship, right the ship, that they could still be successful. And at the running back position and successful enough to where when you get Alvin Kamara back, it's just like this big loaded boost, kind of shot in the arm, at whatever point in the season that's going to be able to elevate your offense to the next level. With all that said, I think it's vital and crucial that Kamara spends as much time as possible throughout, training camp and potentially whatever snaps he gets in the preseason to build up some of that chemistry with a new quarterback. It was great to see him out there with a helmet on because, they can't wear pads or anything. But it was great to see him out there in mini camp and getting some reps in with Derek Carr. You just need to build that chemistry, especially if you're going to miss time. But going to your article and seeing the running backs that you listed, like you said, Dalvin Cook, even at 28 years old, somebody's going to take a flyer on him and run the risk because he's just that talented. Kareem Hunt, I just spent the last 10 minutes of my life ranting on about the NFL and suspensions and this and that. The last things you want to do when you have a suspended player is bring in a guy who has the history, despite how talented he is on the football field. Might not be the best look. Leonard Fournette, yeah, the LSU thing would be cool, but he doesn't really fit that mold of running back that you need if Kamara's going to miss time because you have that in Jamal Williams. Benny Snell, same way. I really enjoyed Benny Snell. I thought he was really good at Kentucky. He had some moments up in Pittsburgh, but again, too much of a workhorse load kind of guy. I see Kenyon Drake. That's the one name that kind of jumps off the page at me. How explosive he is. But he's almost at that 30 age. Yeah. It's a little scary too. I think if the Saints were to go out and say, let's bring in a guy, maybe stash him on the practice squad, we can bring him up if we need him, it would be a guy like Kenyon Drake. But again, I think the Saints are really deep at running back. We had this conversation a couple podcasts ago where the Saints weren't even in the top 10, best running back rooms in the NFL. Yeah. And we're like, how? They have 3 guys that started at least 6 games at running back last season and drafted a guy in the 3rd round. What do you mean? I think the Saints are going to be fine at running back at the end of the day. But like I said, if they go out and get somebody, it's going to be a guy like Kenyon Drake. I remember earlier in the offseason we were talking about guys like Sony Michel would have been a guy that I would have really liked to see if Kamara was going to miss extended time. But again, I think they're good where they're at, and knock on wood, should be a good sign for my guy, Benjamin as well.
Yeah. And even though I wrote the article and, with each back listed, I threw out a sentence or a couple sentences or a paragraph that why they may or may not be a good fit in New Orleans. But ultimately, I agree with you. Again, all this goes out the window. If Williams and or Miller, or for that matter, even Benjamin, get nicked up during the preseason, it wouldn't surprise me if one of those veterans were available at the start, at the end of the preseason or start of the regular season. If they did sign him to a veteran practice squad contract, like you said, but ultimately, I don't think they're looking to bring anyone in. I think they crossed off that box in a big way in their minds when they signed Jamal Williams. And then doubled down when a guy like Kendre Miller fell to them in the 3rd round.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that ultimately, whether it be 4 games, whether it be 6 games, whether it be 8 games, that the Saints feel comfortable with what they have. Because if they didn't, they would have made moves already. I mean, we've talked about it enough. They have almost $15 million in cap space that they can spend. And so we've seen them go and get every wide receiver that's been available ever. So if they didn't feel comfortable with the running backs they had, they would have brought some more in by now, in my mind. So I think they feel good at that position. Now, that's not a Sean Payton type of, we like what we have in our room. This is actually a pretty talented group. And I'm really excited to see the competition that comes out of training camp. Bob, with the last 20 minutes, I wanted to get to something other than Alvin Kamara. I think spending 40 minutes on that kind of gets everybody up to date, gets our opinions. I get on a soapbox for my one time and every month or two. It's usually Bob. But I wanted to talk about some of these lists that came out, and I'll pull out my handy dandy cell phone for this. And this via Jeremy Fowler on ESPN. the best edge rushers in the NFL ranked by executive players, scouts, and coaches. All right. Number 1, Nick Bosa. So be it. Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Hassan Reddick, Max Crosby, Brian Burns, Joey Bosa. Like, the list goes on. Two names that stuck out as honorable mentions. Both, I think, are very low. One is former Saints defensive end Trey Hendrickson. I think that's very low for him, considering how well he did his last year in New Orleans and certainly up in Cincinnati as well. And then the one that kind of affects, the New Orleans Saints now, Cameron Jordan finds himself on the honorable mentions list. He actually had a tweet about that as well. With that said, it wasn't the only Saints defensive captain that found himself a little disrespected on these lists. Same thing, best off-ball linebackers of the NFL. This, again, from Jeremy Fowler, ESPN, from executives, players, scouts, and coaches. They didn't really provide the percentages of how it's influenced, but you get it, guys that are in the league, right, in some form or another. Best off-ball linebackers. Fred Warner, I'm okay with that. Roquan Smith, I like Roquan Smith. Maybe not that high, but I like him. Does he belong in the top 10? Probably, but probably not 2. Tremaine Edmonds, another good one. Devin White at 5. Demario Davis at 6. Now, with all that said, some of the honorable mentions, I may have made the argument to bump into the top 10. Bobby Wagner outside of the top 10. Patrick Queen outside of the top 10. 2 guys that I could definitely see the argument of bumping into the top 10. But Demario Davis outside of the top 5 in best off-ball linebackers, and Cameron Jordan outside of the top 10 in best edge rushers. Bob, this isn't even your arch enemy. This isn't Pro Football Focus, but we're continuing to see Saints players mightily disrespected by media outlets, whether it be ESPN, Pro Football Focus. The Saints have been ranked extremely low on a lot of lists. What do you make of players, coaches, executives? We'll start with Demario Davis, who made a Pro Bowl for the first time last year and was an All-Pro the last few years. What do you make of him not being a top 5 off-ball linebacker in the eyes of a lot of the guys in the league?
It's beyond ridiculous, and I know what Fowler and ESPN said about it being a poll of coaches and executives throughout the league. I don't believe that for a second. If that's the case, then I want to see the poll. I want to see who participated. I realize that it might compromise integrity to show how they voted, but I want to see who participated before I believe that NFL executives and coaches feel that Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, and for that matter, Marshawn Lattimore was way too low on the cornerback list too. I don't believe that the league in general feels that low about Davis, Lattimore, and Cam. First of all, Demario Davis, at worst, he's the number 2 off-ball linebacker in the league. Fred Warner, I'll take Demario on my team before I would Warner, but I'm biased, and I admit that. Warner is a hell of a player. In my opinion, there is no debate on who the top 2 off-ball linebackers are. You can make a case for the other, for 3 through 10, but none of those 3 through 10 are in the same caliber as Fred Warner and Demario Davis. Cam, the top 5 edge rushers that you named, they're tough to argue with at their point in their career. I take a little bit of umbrage with the order that they were listed, but it's tough to argue with all of them being in the top 5. But you mean to tell me that the Chargers Bosa, not the 49ers Bosa, but you mean to tell me that the Chargers Bosa is ahead of Cam Jordan? Hell no. And like Cam said in his tweet, sarcastically, and you can always count on Cam for a laugh. Even if he's blasting someone with both barrels, and doing so in a sarcastic manner, he also does so in a hilarious manner. He not so tongue-in-cheek suggested that maybe these ESPN executives that participated in this poll, maybe they should turn on the film when teams run the ball, because a complete defensive end plays the run as well as he plays the pass. And Cam, for my money, is still one of the best all-around edge defenders in the NFL. His sack numbers have gone down. I will grant that. But I mean, he's still outside of Von Miller. Cam Jordan is the number 2. It has the second most sacks among active players, and there are still some damn good active players out there, that have been around for a decade or so. Cam's coming up on his 13th year, and only Von Miller is ahead of Cam Jordan. When it comes to active sack leaders, and even Vaughn on his best days, and I love Von Miller. He'll be in the Hall of Fame too, and deservedly so. Von Miller on his best days hasn't been able to play the run as well as Cam Jordan. Cam and DeMario severely and grotesquely disrespected once again in a so-called poll by a national site.
To your point at the very beginning of that, every single poll, I guess you can't call them polls, but like awards, right? You're looking at like conference tournament, conference player of the year, all those different things I voted on while I was working in college athletics. Not that they'd ever release, they never took a scan of, what I wrote on paper, what I emailed over and released it, but you'd always see so-and-so got 27 first team votes, so-and-so got this many second. So how do they not release something similar when polls like that go out? Is okay, well, we'll just Nick Bosa got 5 number 1 votes, or whatever it may be, right? Because they can do that at the college level, they can certainly do it at the pro level. And to your point of integrity, I'm not asking you to go play like voter by voter and release their exact list. Just tell me how things worked. It's silly, but at the end of the day, all of these lists are silly. Yeah. They always have been. And it's not just because Bob and I cover the Saints and we see Saints low on the list. I mean, at the end of the day, we could go back to any team, any player, and be like, how is that guy not top whatever? I mean, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson tweeted something today or yesterday about Marshawn Lattimore not being top 5 in the cornerbacks in the ESPN polls. And Chauncey's like, how? But there's always snubs every year. Now, a lot of times does it seem like it's Saints guys? Yeah, I mean, we have our conspiracy theories, mostly Bob. But at the end of the day, these lists are always silly because they don't mean anything.
They're subjective. Right. Just like if you and I were to make a list, you can take umbrage with any list that anybody makes pretty much ever. But the fact that great Saints players are so often disrespected. You can go back to Drew Brees. You can go back before that to Joe Horn, Deuce McAllister. Before that, Ricky Jackson, Pat Swilling, who ridiculously is not in the Hall of Fame. Sam Mills. Why did it take him so long? Again, the lists are always subjective, but the fact that certain players, certain teams get lowballed or underappreciated so much, so often, and so consistently, that's what really sticks with me.
For me, the only lists I'll sit and get I don't even want to say extremely upset, but ones that'll bother me are when guys are left off of Pro Bowls, All Pros, Player of the Year, MVP, things like that get under my skin a little bit, because when you go back in the history of the game, those type of things matter. And yes, like comparing player to player all time and some of these lists, so-and-so is the greatest, whatever. Like, yeah, like those are subjective too, and they don't really matter. But when you're talking about like the NFL's 50th anniversary team or players of the decade, going back and seeing, so-and-so made this many Pro Bowls, or so-and-so was an All-Pro this many times. Like, those matter. So when guys get left off of those, I can start talking. When people get left off of ESPN polls, like, it is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
I've worked for the worldwide leader in a capacity before, and I can say, just like ESPN, Sports Illustrated, where I've worked. I mean, you've worked for what was it, SB Nation in some capacity. Like, none of these platforms are perfect in how they do anything because it's ran by humans. Like, none of us are perfect.
Except you, Sports Illustrated, since you guys are the one that signs you guys are perfect. So thank you.
I had to throw that out.
I had to.
You're like, Brendan, stop, because you're not paid by them anymore. But no, at the end of the day, like, none of these polls are perfect. But I do get upset when guys are left off of certain things. I mean, all the years that we had written and talked about DeMario being left off of Pro Bowl teams, like, that's going to affect him in the eyes of people 20 years from now when they look back. Like, well, how good was DeMario? Oh, he only made one Pro Bowl. And it's going to be like, no, like, you don't understand. Like, he was the best off-ball linebacker for like a 5-year stretch. Like, he was extremely good. People are going to look back, and this bothered me the other day, and I know it'll bother you, and this is a good segue into our next topic and our final topic of the night, is ESPN released a list, a graphic on Twitter of the last MVP winner for every team in the NFL, and it was like New Orleans Saints, none. And that's one that's always bothered us because it's like, Drew, like, 11 is the one I'm referencing, but you can go back and go, okay, like 09 was a Peyton year. Okay, I'm not mad, right? You could make the argument, but I'm not mad about that one. You can go to 18 where he finished second, and you're like, okay, I'm not mad. Would have been nice, but I'm not mad. But then you go to 11 and you go, I'm mad. I'm really mad. And Bob and I have talked about that so much over the year and years that we've worked together. But again, like, I can get genuinely upset about that or bothered by that because it reflects how a player is looked at in the history of the game. And in 50 years, when, essentially, like, my grandkids are looking at it and go, well, how good was Drew Brees? He never won an MVP. And you're like, hold on now.
Right.
Well, and then you'd be like, well,
why is Marcus Colston probably never going to make the Hall of Fame? The one argument that's going to be used against him, well, he never made a Pro Bowl.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, that's horseshit from the very start. You're talking about a man who retired as a franchise leader in receptions, reception yards, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Had 6 or 7 1,000-yard years, something like that. Should be an all-time great. Not top 10, not top 10, certainly not top 5 of all time, but a Hall of Famer. He's never going to make it. In part, the major argument is going to be he never made a Pro Bowl.
Well, I was gonna say, you want to talk about, you mentioned franchise leader all time across multiple categories. You want to talk about some of the best Saints receivers of all time. I look at a guy like Joe Horn, though it was a short stint, but Joe was a 4-time Pro Bowler. If I put up Joe's Pro Bowl years against Colston's best years, I mean, I haven't done it, but I'd assume that they'd look similar, or Colston would have better numbers, particularly in the end zone. So, there's things like that. You're like, yeah, that doesn't really make sense. That's where I'll be bothered, upset, have you, not by lists that come out in July before the season starts. So with that little segue of Drew not winning the MVP in 11, let's talk about 2011 for the last little 5 minutes that we have, because Lance Moore sat down with John Vilma via Boot Crew Media, and Lance asked John what was the best team in Saints history. And John Vilma started by saying, well, if you're talking about results, it's going to be 2000. And before he could even finish that, Lance was like, no, I don't care about the results. What was the best team in Saints history? And you could tell that they were both on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
that it was the 2011 campaign. And Vilma comes out and says that we all viewed it as a disappointment, particularly because the offense was putting up historic numbers. We were humming as a defense, and that he'll never know how they let Alex Smith, score in that game. And he's, it was just brutal and honest, but he said that was the team that was supposed to run its way, like not get to the Super Bowl, not win, but run its way through, because of how dominant they were throughout the year. And John said it still stings to this day. So looking back at the 2011 season, and I'll let you kind of promote something that you're working on article-wise with Kyle T. Mosley. How do you view the 2011 campaign? Obviously, people that have watched it know how we both feel about it, but comparing it to the 2009 season, that's always been kind of a touchy subject, because obviously 2009 led to the Lombardi Trophy and the only Super Bowl championship in New Orleans Saints history, while the 11 season did not, but was the record-breaking year for so many records that still stand to this day. By the New Orleans Saints, and I'm talking NFL history, not just Saints history.
Yeah. Listen, and yeah, to sort of promote it a little bit, Kyle Mosley and myself are collaborating. We're putting together multiple pieces, videos included, of our top 10, each of our personal top 10 Saints teams of all time. If you guys have followed me for a while, I love doing these historical pieces. I've taken a little bit of a break from it this off season, but I'm excited to be doing this. And I'm not going to tell you who my number one is, and I'm not going to ruin Kyle's lead either by telling you his number one. But I will say a couple of things. Firstly, Brendan and I have talked to Jonathan Vilma and a couple other players. We know personally how highly they feel about the 2011 team. Secondly, we've both talked to players on and off the record that were on 09 and 11, and they have said almost to a man that the 11 team was better. The most I could ever get out of someone who's played for both teams, as far as an answer tilted towards 09, is them saying something along the lines of, well, the 09 team finished the job, the 11 team didn't. They still didn't say the 09 team was better. They just said that. I firmly believe that if the 2011 Saints would have won the Super Bowl like they should have won the Super Bowl, that we would be comparing them to among the greatest teams of all time. Those early 90s Cowboys teams, those 97, 98 Bronco teams, the greatest show on turf, 85 Bears, 86, it said, you guys, 78 Steelers, 89 49ers. That 11 Saints team, if they would have won it all, they would have been at least in the conversation with some of those all-time great franchises. That's how strongly I believe in the 2011 team. Who am I to disagree with Vilma and Lance Moore, two guys who played very well on both those teams, when they say they believe the 11 team was better. It's always difficult, as you just got done saying. It's always difficult to compare eras, or even this was basically the same era with many of the same players. But I believe that if you put the 2011 team versus the 2009 team, with both of them in their primes, that in those particular years, I think the 11 team beats them, but they didn't finish the job.
I've always said 11 was more talented in multiple facets, right? Because, the offense gets talked about a lot, rightfully so. I mean, they broke so many NFL records that year. But special teams doesn't get talked about enough, right? Like Morstead set records that year. Darren Sproles with return yards. Even John Casey, and I think that was year like 20 or 21 for him, was setting records at that point. I mean, special teams was really good that year. The defense didn't sit there and set a ton of records. And, frankly, I might take the 09 defense over the 11 defense because they were more opportunistic, not because they were more talented. But they came up with turnovers at crucial times. Obviously, that showed throughout the playoffs as well in 2009. But no, the 11 team was so talented, and I think anytime that I get to hear I don't want to call it validation, but like kind of that my thoughts and your thoughts are the same is like from the players that were on that team was like, well, 11 should have won the whole thing. And again, like the one that gets me is John didn't say we should have won the Super Bowl. Like we should have ran through it. And he's right, because if I remember correctly, and my memory's not great as is, it's also late here on the East Coast. If they won that game, they would have hosted the NFC Championship game against the Giants. And if they'd won that, they would have went and played the Patriots in the Super. No, who? I'm in my years mixed.
I'm drawing a blank. Yeah,
because the Giants
beat
the Niners. Yeah. So then they would have played the the Pats. So for me, it's just one of those like I still think they would have won. I think the Giants would have been. I don't want to say easy because, I mean, they end up being the Super Bowl champions, but I think the Saints at home against that team would have smoked them. So, nonetheless, like I said, it's nice to hear from the players themselves that, hey, that team was better. You guys are absolutely right, in a way to say, like, hey, that is the best Saints team of all time. Bob won't ruin his, analysis for the article, but since I'm not in that article, yes, for me, the 11 team is the greatest Saints team of all time. And honestly, I don't even think I'd do 1-2. I think I'd do 1A, 1B. And because, one team won the Super Bowl. But I'd still put the 11 team higher in terms of talent, right? If you're going on like historical senses, 09 is going to be there because they won. But in terms of talent, 11 by far. But with that, we conclude episode 52 of the Bayou Blitz podcast with Bob and myself. It's crazy to think that finally got here. Finally did it. A year under our belts, hopefully many more to come. With that said, Bob, we have a giveaway coming up. And you have a lot of articles that you're going to be writing now that the off season is not so much the off season anymore. I mean, training camp's just a little bit away. The schedule came out yesterday, or was that today? Yesterday.
Last night unofficially, John Hendricks grabbed the official announcement for our network this morning.
There you go. So, Bob, where can everybody follow you, your great work, as we finally wrap up the off season?
Folks, thank you for joining us as always. And happy 1 year birthday to your Bayou Blitz. We're past the toddling stage. We're walking. We're getting ready to run. We just need you guys to give us a shove in the right direction. And you guys have always been great at doing that. So please continue to do it. Continue to support your network. Continue to support your show by following all of us at the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, the Bayou Blitz Facebook group, and the Bayou Blitz Twitter page at Bayou Blitz Pod. For me personally, you can follow me on Facebook, Bob Rose, and I am over on Twitter as well, at BobbyR2613. Brendan and I stream all of our shows on our personal pages, but please also check them out and steer other Saints fans towards those Bayou Blitz Twitter pages and Facebook pages that I mentioned. Thank you all so much for a fantastic year one. We're going to be better for you in year two. That's a promise.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed it, guys. Like I've said many times before, getting on a Wednesday night or, Wednesday on a Thursday, as Bob likes to say it, depending on our schedules. It's like coming together and hanging out with a big group of friends with your family. It's like a big barbecue and you're sitting here talking about football, which, I mean, nobody could ask for a better job than that. It's always been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to more here in the future. Like Bob said, going to be better this upcoming season for you guys, and going to be bringing on more guests, and it's just going to be a lot of fun as we continue to get this thing rolling. And I don't know about the toddler comparison. I don't know a whole lot of 1-year-olds that are sprinting, but we'll give it to you, Bob.
We're special. We're special.
We're the best. We're the best. Dang it. For me, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Still figuring out Threads, just like everybody else, but it's all BT Boylan. Bob's just like, I'm too old to be figuring out more social media. Man.
I've been asked a couple times as recently as today, "Hey, you on Threads yet?" No, not yet. Speaking of toddler steps, I think that'll be the next baby step I take. But for now, you can only find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Saints News.
Hey, Bob's keeping it simple. For me, you can follow me on all 3 at BT Boylan. Like I said, follow the Bayou Blitz on Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. We're going to be having some giveaways, one for the 1-year anniversary, one for the kickoff of the season. Whether we actually do that in September or whether we do a giveaway in August, I'm not 100% sure yet because, Bob and I like football. So are we going to celebrate for like preseason week 1 or regular season week 1? I don't know. Oh, Bob, we could do giveaways when we see each other in week 2 as well.
Yeah.
We got a lot of stuff coming up. So if you guys like free stuff, which if you don't, you're weird, just go follow us at Bayou Blitz Pod. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Bayou Blitz. Thanks for making your show so successful and so much fun for a calendar year. Until next week, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. We'll see you for another edition of the Bayou Blitz podcast. See you then.